Hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And I'm Dr. Scott.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each week, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
Today, our episode is on the forensic psych topic of the nexus of bullying, criminality, and long-term mental health implications. Hey, everyone. Welcome back. I think we owe big thanks to our listeners and our new listeners right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know how it happens, what happens with the podcast gods, but Apple Podcasts has been featuring us on their front page under a section called Criminal Minds with some other really wonderful, cool podcasts. And we've been up there a few weeks now. So thank you to all the people who have decided to give us a try because of that, because our numbers are up. It's fun to be back in the top 150 and 200 of true crime podcasts. So yeah, welcome to any new folks out there.
And there are also some just fascinating instances or information that come up when we look at our stats about who's listening and what countries that we'll have surges in for a while. And of course, I don't know the numbers of downloads in that particular area, although probably there's some way of finding it. But we're constantly really high in Slovenia.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know how that happened, but thank you, Slovenia. And I'm going to butcher this when I'm going to try and say it. Hvala Slovenia, which I think means thank you, Slovenia in Slovenia. And
did you look that up on Google?
I did not. I have the wonderful, wonderful opportunity to work with a Slovenian actress here in Los Angeles, Ana Rosa Semperman, a wonderful, very, very talented young woman who has been volunteering her time as well as pursuing her career and training here at the Stella Adler Academy.
Mm-hmm.
She provides training along with me to train law enforcement in how to de-escalate mental health episodes in the community. And she can jump from an individual who is on the verge of violent self-harm to a psychotic person sitting in a park to an individual having a manic episode. I mean, she's the first one. I mean, we have a whole set of really great actors, but Anna is really wonderful. She'll go, okay, what do you need me to do today? Which role? What do you need me to do?
That's so fun.
And then she'll come up with a new storyline. And she's really, really great with the cops and keeps them on their toes. So thank you so much, Ana Rosa Semperman.
Yes, yes. And thank you to all of our new Patreon members. You continue to blow us away at your support for our show, which is super, super helpful these days. It really is what's keeping us afloat. So you guys are the best. If you are on the Discord channel, so that would be the intern or doctorate levels, let me know. We just got we toyed around with some new stickers. Did I show you the new training horse sticker, Scott?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
And I think somebody got a t-shirt, right?
Yeah, someone got a t-shirt already, but I ordered the stickers and I ordered them in a glittery overlay, and it's kind of in the cute kawaii font and it says training whore. So if you guys are on the Discord channel, I posted a picture of it. If you want one, let me know. I will send it to you in the next Patreon mail. But yeah, if you're thinking about joining Patreon, we would greatly appreciate it. The lowest tier is $5 a month and stay for as long as you want. And we're happy to have everyone there for as long as they can afford. And we just, again, it's means the world to us.
Yeah, thank you so much. So recap on our last episode. Our most recent episode was on obsessive compulsive disorder and the very, very small space that it has overlapping with the criminal justice system. We explained what OCD is and is not. And we reviewed the many, many faces and subclinicals of OCD, including harm OCD, pedophilia OCD, and relationship OCD. And we also parsed it out from OCPD, which is very important. We also get into some interesting cases in which defense teams experts have tried to use OCD as an excuse for criminal behavior. Spoiler alert, not a great defense. So please give it a listen if you haven't already.
Yes. So let's get into today. The topic of bullying in American schools from elementary education through the college years has gained a lot of traction over the past few decades. As mental health professionals and risk assessment professionals have brought more light to this topic, difficult and complex conversations cannot be ignored any longer. From threatening and coercive behaviors to outright criminal acts, bullying has morphed into a hybrid set of actions that take place in real life and in the digital world of e-communication and social media.
So just as a trigger warning, we have discussions of violence, child suicide, child abuse, child neglect, and criminal acts.
So let's start with a very recent and tragic example from Indiana. Sammy Teutsch was a 10-year-old boy who died by suicide due to relentless bullying in May of this year. Prior to his death, his family had contacted the school about bullying at least 20 times, but no effective action was ever taken. Other parents in this particular district also reported similar issues with bullying. While making breakfast on a Sunday morning, Sammy's father summoned him but found him unresponsive in his bedroom. Sammy's body was warm, but he wasn't breathing, so his father performed CPR, talking to his son the whole time. At a later time, Sammy's father said that he replays that moment over and over in his mind, stating, quote, "I kept thinking, if you just hear my voice, you're not going to leave me." It was determined that the night before Sammy died, he received threats that he would be attacked at school on Monday.
So all of the information that comes after the event paints a full picture of what Sammy had to endure at school. He was an adorable young kid. Just pictures and pictures of him all are splashed all over web pages with a huge smile, with just a real sense of joy about him. But he was bullied for his glasses and for his teeth. He was physically attacked on the school bus, resulting in broken glasses on a number of occasions and multiple injuries. And then he was further attacked on the school premises in the school bathroom. And quote says he was beat up on the school bus. The kids broke his glasses and everything. And I called the school and I'm like, what are you doing about this? It keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And it's not getting any better. In fact, it's getting worse. And that, again, was Sammy's father. So his dad said that this was just one of the many times that he had been in contact with the school about the bullying. The school was aware of the bullying, but had failed to intervene effectively.
But the story with that school does not end there. Sammy's best friend, Josh, has been experiencing these intense bullying situations since he started attending the same school. Josh's family, the Henderson family, has consistently communicated their concerns to the school, especially after Sammy's recent death. Unfortunately, after Sammy's suicide, the bullying against Josh worsened. Prior to his death, Josh was taken to the emergency room twice within 2 weeks for head injuries from bullying incidents. And despite ongoing communication attempts, the family felt ignored by the school. Josh's father attempted to meet with school officials about the bullying, and upon his arrival, he was met by a police officer and told to leave after the meeting. Therefore, he continued to reach out via phone as the bullying persisted. On May 17th, the school called Josh's parents about his attendance. You see, Josh had been struggling to return to school full-time due to grief over Sammy's death. And to address the issue once and for all, the Hendersons went to the school to meet with administrators and submit a bullying report. They asked to meet with specific school administrators and were asked to wait in the school office. Shortly after, a Greenfield police officer and a Hancock County sheriff arrived and asked him to leave. The school claimed that the Hendersons were disruptive and had shown up unannounced. Yeah, I mean, you're goddamn right they were. I mean, what are you expecting here?
Right. And just to riff a little bit or have further conversation on that point, we inhabit a really interesting time in history right now where so much gets posted online, and there is very much that an out of context video of a type of interaction like this would completely portray these parents. They'd call them Karens, right?
Oh, geez.
Over involved, demanding. They're not in this instance at all. Like, and we have a quote from a school administrator that I'm going to share with you, but I'm just going to tell you that since this is very much in the wheelhouse of what I do in my day-to-day work, schools have to have a protocol set up, and their protocol has to include collateral damage that extends beyond the precipitating event. And clearly they were not set up for this. For one thing, it's clear who the perpetrators of this were. And that should have been shut down immediately, which of course it was not. So Dr. Harold Olin, the school administrator, stated on May 17th, the Henderson family was called by a school administrator at Greenfield Intermediate School to discuss an educational record specific to their child. The parents were asked to set up a meeting to address that matter, which had nothing to do with bullying. The parents refused to set up a meeting with school staff at that time. Instead, the parents came to the school unannounced that afternoon and demanded to speak with the principal about an unrelated matter. The school administrators were both working with other students and families at the time the Hendersons arrived. They were told that they could make an appointment for a later time, or they could wait in the office. They chose to wait in the office. While they were waiting to see the principal, the parents became disruptive in the outer office. A school resource officer in the area suggested that the parents leave the school and set an appointment for another time. In that setting, they could discuss both matters, the educational record and an event that happened on the school bus. Greenfield Intermediate School administrators followed up with the family on the same day the parents shared their concern. The claim was investigated by administrators and the school resource officer. A conversation with Mr. Henderson was held via phone with the school SRO and school administration. At the end of the meeting, the claim was determined to be unfounded. The parents also made an appointment with school administration to discuss the original matter. That meeting was held with the administration on Monday, May 20th. Okay, there's a lot of gish galloping going on here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of avoiding what's going on. And I could also say from, again, what my work responsibilities are, what I do in my day-to-day work, and then also from an additional clinical perspective, even what you're making sound as a very professional account is badly done.
It is.
There's no talk of attempts at de-escalating, of offering alternative on the site. He's saying in plain language that they just continued to minimize it and put the responsibility back on the parents to set an appointment. I get that the parents stepped outside of what was scheduled. I get that.
Sure.
However, it goes downhill from there on, and it does not seem to me, viewing this third party from the information I have, that the parents were responsible for it escalating to this point.
Well, and there's no empathy to the situation here.
Well, and certainly not even an attempt to reflect it in that statement.
No, not at all. And I love that you said there's no attempt to de-escalate this. Like, if you've told them to wait in the lobby and like, maybe we'll get to you, because that's essentially what happened, of course they're going to be upset. Of course they're going to be demanding to speak to someone, and just triage what you have. If you have a schedule.
Right. And then to retract that offer.
Sure. Yeah. And just let like the cops handle it. I mean, it's
right.
So much more could have been done with some tact and professionalism and empathy to how these parents are feeling. That would have gone a long way in repairing some of these relationships. But the Hendersons assert that the school has been evasive, non-responsive, and manipulative. But Josh's father asserts that he has to focus on their son's emotional health and well-being, considering the impact that his best friend's death had on him. So he said that his son is unable to be alone after his best friend died. And he has told his dad that he could do the same thing, meaning you're hearing some suicidal ideation from Josh, who's the best friend that's still alive. I mean, my heart aches for these families. I'm grateful that they're sharing their stories and recognizing Josh's pain. It sounds like they're well aware of the possible contagion effect that could be going on here, and they're watching him closely while supporting him. I certainly hope they've removed him from that school. I mean, there's only so much bad treatment you can take as a client of an institution before, you kind of move on and do what's best for your child. But I guess, we'll kind of stay tuned to that to see what unfolds there.
And also, and that is problematic as well, because while it is great if there is an option to place the child, the student, in another setting, that can be great, but you also can't ignore what that child feels. That child can also simultaneously feel relief that they're not going to be around the perpetrators anymore, and shame that they weren't able to handle it, that they weren't able to have it resolved. And then also the big picture is, then does the school just ignore it? well, like the problem's gone, we transferred the kid out. So again, hopefully there'll be more information that comes up. So we've offered you a particularly horrific example of what can happen and continues to happen to this day across the country. But let's get back to some actual definitions and clinical perspective on this phenomenon. Bullying is a series of actions that include the use of force, threats, hurtful teasing, or coercion to harm or intimidate someone. It's typically repetitive and habitual, making it a persistent problem for the victims in this sense. And the focus on those terms of repetitive and habitual. So, another key characteristic that sets bullying apart from other forms of conflict is an imbalance of power, whether it's physical or social. This imbalance allows the bully to exert control over their victim repeatedly, making the behavior distinct, harmful type of aggression. This is so important today because bullying is so often portrayed in the media as overwhelmingly physical. It's not just physical, it can be intimidation. But again, an important thing is we're not talking about one-off moments.
Right.
We're talking about something that is chronic and ongoing.
Yeah, it almost gives me flavors of the hard thing to recognize in stalking behaviors, right? Because it's not just one thing. It's that repetitive, habitual nature of the situation and the conflict. So bullying can manifest in different forms and in different contexts. A single individual targeting another to gain power is referred to as individual bullying. This form of bullying is marked by one person's desire to dominate another. Group bullying, also known as mobbing, involves multiple people targeting an individual, often with bystanders who encourage or support the behaviors. Those bystanders may be themselves at the effect of multiple psychological and social influences, groupthink, group mentality, fear of becoming a target themselves, or even an attempt to align with what is perceived to be the holder of the power in that social setting. And both individual and group bullying are often seen in schools and workplaces, where they're sometimes termed peer abuse. The concept of rankism explores bullying in terms of social rank or status, where individuals use their position to dominate others.
Bullying can occur in various places like schools, within a family, workplaces, homes, and neighborhoods at large. In college and university settings, particularly in the Indian subcontinent, bullying is known as ragging. And with the advent of social media, cyberbullying has become the prevalent issue, allowing bullies to target their victims online 24 hours a day, often with devastating effects. And research on bullying has provided really valuable insights into the dynamics and the consequences. Swedish-Norwegian researcher Dan Oluis defines bullying as a person being exposed to negative actions repeatedly over time. The negative actions can include physical contact, verbal abuse, or other harmful behaviors intentionally inflicted to cause injury or discomfort. And in a study of American football players, the likelihood of bullying was significantly influenced by whether the most influential male figures in the players' lives would approve of such behavior. Another study published by the Lancet Child and Adolescent Health in 2019 highlighted a correlation between social media use among girls and increased perpetration of and exposure to bullying.
Yeah, the saying goes now, bullying doesn't end at 3:00 when school ends anymore. It's around the clock.
Yeah.
A bigger perspective also requires us to focus on the legal and social understanding of bullying, which varies across different regions. For instance, the United Kingdom does not have a legal definition of bullying yet, while some states in the US have implemented anti-bullying laws. Bullying behaviors can be categorized into 4 main types: psychological, also known as emotional or relational, verbal, physical, and cyber. These categories often overlap, making the experience of bullying complex and multifaceted. The motivations behind bullying are diverse. Bullies often rationalize their behavior by pointing to differences in social class, race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, appearance, behavior, body language, personality, someone's reputation, things like strength or size or even abilities. And these justifications, however, do not diminish the harmful impact bullying has on individuals and, of course, the wider communities.
So, yeah, this is such a fascinating subject because, again, as we've said in so many episodes, you can get to the same destination but come from different origins completely.
Yeah,
In my work, I have gone into homes where immediately I know where that bullying is coming from. I know why that kid is a bully at school because I see the interactions between the parents. I see the way the parents treat me coming in. I see all of it. I'm like, okay, this is learned behavior,
sure.
which to me makes sense when you see sort of these talk show makeups or even online in personal blogs where people share that they confronted their bully 25 years later and the person cops to it. The
Uh-huh.
bully says, I was miserable and I was an asshole or I was a bitch to you and I am so sorry. I mean, there are these wonderful kind of
Yeah,
resolution and makeup stories. And then there's also the opposite where you'll go into a home and you're like, wait, the vibe here is really good. The parents are great. What's going on with the wiring of
sure.
this kid that makes them have some of these antisocial tendencies?
Yep.
Again, there's just a lot here that we don't know. And each one of these cases of bullying really does require a lot of introspection by the administrators who have to be trained. But on the other side, I have seen schools actively just raise the defenses. Like in private schools where I've had to go in with like clear allegations of bullying, man, they just lawyer up really, really quick.
Yeah, I wonder what the liability is really like, especially in areas where there aren't laws, and what payoffs and settlements have been with schools, and maybe even private schools or school districts for the public schools. How much at fault can they be held liable for, when something like this happens? I mean, you think of Sammy's suicide at the top of this episode. If they had contacted the school over 20 times, what do you do at that point? I mean, what leg does a school have to stand on?
None, because I mean, in today's world, all the dad has to do or mom has to do is say, well, here's my phone. Here's my outgoing call
Yeah.
with time.
Yeah.
Here's every time I have called. Is there a matching record of the school on the other side taking my call and taking that note? And if the school can't provide that, they're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. And then, parents are just managing and stressed out in life anyway. And then
Oh,
to have
absolutely.
something like this rear its head and have to, obviously prioritize this because this is your kid and your kid's safety. I mean, that just throws everything off. And then, how many parents can really, I mean, I guess at a private school, maybe some of those parents can afford to take some legal action, but what parents are going to be able to sue a school? And,
Well,
it's,
and also, is it really going to work out for them when it's one set of parents that's suing a private school and the rest of the population of that school or the enrollment at school is paying a lot of money from wealthy parents to get there? Now, I want to fully admit that there are also school administrators are juggling unbelievable amounts of plates and balls in the background that the public will never know about. So I totally acknowledge that. And I also acknowledge that the school districts that I worked for out here in Southern California, especially the largest one that I have encounters, which is LAUSD, LA Unified School District, they have protocols in place and they act on it very quickly. They have their own emergency response team. Like they're on it. But even they admit that, for such a big organization, it's not a homogenous population. School personalities can change from neighborhood to neighborhood. And sometimes bullying is an accepted part of the culture that inhabits that neighborhood. So then what are you going to do? So anyway, moving on for more clinical information, and then we're going to come back to a couple of other challenging cases, it's really important to talk about what it is not. And we touched on it earlier, but I want to dive into that a little bit more. It's vital to refrain from muddying the waters when we're considering what is not bullying. And that's a difficult discussion to have, I think, particularly for parents that may have their own concerns because their perception of their child's experience may be exaggerated or they may minimize it, because parents are struggling to figure out how the whole parenting thing goes themselves. And it's really only relatively recently, like in the last 3 decades, I would say, that we talk about what bullying is. And it's just as important in this conversation to talk about what it's not.
Right. I mean, not all conflicts or aggressive behaviors constitute bullying. A single episode of disagreement or a single or even several incidents of heated arguments between peers does not necessarily qualify as bullying. Similarly, mutual teasing or playful banter where both parties are participating willingly and finding it enjoyable is not considered bullying. Although, as we know, a child's and even sometimes an adult's perception of that can be off or can change rapidly about what's going on.
Right. It kind of comes down to a consent issue, right?
Yeah.
Like at some point, if you get to be uncomfortable, it's like, okay, this needs to stop.
Yeah, that's gone too
And
far.
then is it in a group of women, a group of men, or is it a mixed group? Are people going to be receptive to someone suddenly drawing a boundary? That it just gets very complex very quickly. Constructive criticism, when it is offered up or given in a respectful manner and it's intended to help somebody improve, does not fall under the definition of bullying, which is very interesting because many, many corporate lawsuits regarding HR are on that very subject, where people say, well, I'm being bullied by my manager. And the manager's going, actually, no, this person is not doing their work, or they're not doing the work that they've been instructed to do, or doing it in the manner that they've been instructed to do. And that's not bullying. I'm providing constructive criticism and support. But isolated acts of aggression or hostility that occur without a pattern or repetition or without the intent to dominate or intimidate don't meet the criteria for bullying. So it can be bad, it can be unpleasant, it can be very uncomfortable. But if they're isolated and it's not repetitive and it's not part of a pattern, then it doesn't meet this overall sort of overarching criteria for bullying. It's also vitally important that the adults involved, the parents, the teachers, the administration, et cetera, they're morally bound to develop critical thinking skills that are essential to distinguish these everyday interactions from bullying. Again, with bullying being characterized as repeated, intentional effort to harm or control someone through an imbalance of power.
Yeah, I think that bullying term, we hear that, we think of schools, but when it comes to workplaces, I mean, it's being thrown around a lot. I mean, being someone who essentially does clinical work in a workplace with thousands of employees, they're coming to me for stress and anxiety. And then they start talking about being bullied by people in their work group. And sometimes I'm like, oh shit, this is a total hostile work environment situation. And then sometimes I'm like, why don't you just do your job? In my head, of course, right? I'm like, yeah, you're probably just getting some constructive criticism or getting write-ups because, it's for a reason. But the bullying term gets tossed around and people like to use it to deflect to other people rather than taking some responsibility for their own actions, I think.
And that's where it gets complex, right?
Especially for adults.
Yeah, for adults, right? Because by that time you're set, and sometimes you're not always willing to have that difficult conversation about, well, let's talk about accountability.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And we're not going to do a deep dive here on the effects of bullying because I feel like we've talked in so many different episodes on how this impacts people, especially when we've talked about, what role bullying plays in school shootings and incidents of violence when it comes to kids and adolescents. But just to put this out here so we have a good understanding, the director at the Anti-Bullying Center at Trinity College, Dr. Mona Moore, has stated that research shows persistent bullying, whether in children or adults, can lead to stress-related illnesses and sometimes even suicidal ideation and behaviors. Victims of bullying often suffer from long-term emotional and behavioral issues. These can include loneliness, depression, anxiety, and low self-esteem, making them just more vulnerable to illness. We know all of those things impact our immune systems. Bullying can cause young children to have difficulty adjusting socially, and those who bully others while being bullied themselves tend to have even greater social problems. Mental health reports link bullying to eating disorders, as well as anxiety, body dysmorphia, and other psychological issues. Both victims and bullies often experience higher levels of loneliness overall, which is really interesting to look at how it's impacting both perpetrator and victim.
Yeah.
So, as far as the developmental origins of bullying behavior, bullies are shaped by their early experiences rather than being inherently predisposed to such behavior, which does exist, but much more shaped by their world around them, their families of origin, and interpersonal relationships. So, when the typical aggression observed in toddlers is not managed with consistent discipline, children may fail to develop the necessary internal restraints against aggressive behaviors. This early developmental stage is critical as bullying behavior often persists due to the initial rewards that it provides to the perpetrator. So, empirical studies reveal a distinct psychological profile among bullies. And here are some of those items. So, deficiency in prosocial behavior is one, meaning that bullies generally do not engage in actions that are intended to benefit others. You might also see absence of anxiety. They exhibit low levels of anxiety and are not easily troubled by feelings of worry or fear. I think we're seeing little flavors of antisocial personality disorder with those two items, as well as this one, empathy deficits. A significant lack of empathy characterizes bullies as they struggle to understand or resonate with the emotions of others.
I think those two are fascinating because those absolutely can be learned behaviors. If a child has not been exposed to regular levels of anxiety about moving through the world or about and is not necessarily given a structure for what is right and wrong or how to make those decisions, then that's how they're going to present to the world at large. Empathy deficits don't necessarily come strictly from wiring,
right?
But because they've not been taught empathy. It's one of the things that's very controversial in school protocols today is like schools are actually trying to teach empathy. And there's a huge part of the population that says, I don't want my kids learning that. I don't want my kids to care about what other people feel.
You're the problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So along with the points that you gave, there are three more that are very interesting as well. One is paranoid cognition, because bullies frequently misinterpret neutral or ambiguous social cues. They misinterpret them as hostile, which is indicating that there's a form of cognitive paranoia. Positive self-perception. Despite their detrimental impact on peers, bullies often maintain a favorable self-image. If it's a learned behavior and they see mom or dad bullying and getting their way, well, why wouldn't they carry on that behavior on the schoolyard or in the office? It works. This is what works for mom and dad. This will work for me. And then there's also the point of interpersonal strain, because chronic bullies tend to have problematic relationships with both of their parents and peers, which then may perpetrate their aggressive behaviors. Again, relating it to learned behaviors. Just because they're experiencing problematic relationships in all those domains doesn't mean that they still don't think that that's the way to walk through the world.
Sure.
So both genders participate in bullying, but their approaches definitely diverge. Male aggressors are more likely to engage in overt forms of aggression like physical intimidation and direct confrontations, while female aggressors typically will resort to relational aggression, which involves inflicting harm through social manipulation. So this can include tactics like spreading malicious rumors, orchestrating social exclusion, threatening to withdraw a friendship, and employing the silent treatment. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't ever experience profound levels of bullying that I'm aware of. I mean, I certainly had some bad moments, especially being a kid coming out in North Alabama in the 70s and 80s. But I will say this, I was in an office situation one time where there was a real split between the two people running the company. And I guess I fell on the side of the one. I came afoul of somebody, and I got shunned by my coworkers this was like probably 22, 23 years ago, shunned by my coworkers for the last 6 weeks. And these, like, two of them were people that I had known for literally a decade. And to
Wow.
this day, I was like, I remember being in that situation going, I'm a fucking adult and I can't believe other adults are treating me like this. Like, this
Yeah.
is wild. Never got
Yeah.
any resolution on that one either.
Oh.
Have you ever had an experience like that?
No, no, I really haven't. I'm just thinking back to like these differences between the males and females. And I think boys or males know what is going to sort of demean another boy or girl, and then, or another boy, and then a girl knows what is going to hit home for another girl, right? So that's what they go after. So for boys, it's going to be, hey, let me like physically intimidate you and overpower you so you look like a weakling. And then girls, it's like a little bit more orchestrated of like, what's emotionally gonna hurt you or hit home. Like, let me talk about your clothes, or let me make fun of you, the way your hair is, because we're just, that's what's important to us. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I'm guessing it doesn't say explicitly here, but that it is, usually boys bullying boys and girls bullying other girls. So I would imagine that's why we see the differences there. Just a hypothesis. I don't know. But additional studies have shown that jealousy, envy, and perceived grievances can motivate individuals to bully others. However, research on the self-esteem of bullies has produced mixed results. While some bullies clearly exhibit arrogance and narcissism, they are generally using the acts of bullying to hide feelings of their own shame, anxiety, low self-esteem, or to, in turn, boost their self-esteem by demeaning others. Remember this particular phrase as it parallels that all individuals with early onset conduct disorder in that they are willing to violate the rights of others. So, I mean, I know I've already even said it in this episode, and I don't want to say, oh, we're starting to diagnose these kiddos as personality, antisocial personality disorders or anything, because we can't. But conduct disorder is something that we can certainly look at. Physical aggression and assault is not the only way to demean people. These types of behaviors give them a false sense of autonomy. Bullies may also act out because they have been bullied themselves, which is something we hear commonly. And psychologist Roy Baumeister suggests that people prone to abusive behavior often have inflated but fragile egos. Bullies' high self-regard makes them sensitive to criticism and lack of respect, prompting violent and insulting reactions, which in and of itself is a very narcissistic response.
I wonder who that applies to. Who could that possibly describe?
Stop. I'm in my happy place right now.
Okay. Sorry.
No, I know. Other risk factors for bullying include depression, personality disorders, quickness to anger, addiction to aggressive behaviors, misinterpreting others' actions as hostile, and an obsession with preserving self-image, as well as rigid or obsessive behaviors. And again, that's for children and adults. So in one study, a mix of antisocial traits and depression was the best predictor of youth violence, whereas exposure to violent video games and television was not. Always want to take an opportunity to put that in there.
That's been discussed over and over again, and it always gets so mixed up. Even today, like, I don't think you and I were at this particular ATAP, where we were there on different days, but there was someone speaking, this was several years ago, and they were trying to draw a line between video games and violent behavior. And it was just so frustrating because I'm like, please don't get yourself to this level and be speaking to this number of highly qualified law enforcement and risk assessors and give incorrect information,
Yeah, I'm surprised that made it on the agenda, unless there was something new that I don't know.
No, it was just kind of throwaway. It's also misinterpreting the data. Like,
okay.
yes, there are shooters who have engaged in one-person shooters, but there's also millions of people worldwide that play games with single shooter, and they're not acting out in that way, right? So, as we always do, because we are we're such purveyors of informed research, there's substantial indication that contradicts these other views that we just discussed of bullying being a set of just learned behaviors and poor, inadequate approaches to interpersonal relationships. So there's research that leans towards bullying emerging from strictly genetic factors or brain abnormalities in a specific individual. And while parents can help children develop emotional regulation to curb aggression, some children will fail to acquire these skills due to insecure attachment, ineffective discipline and parameters, stressful home environments, or hostile siblings. And Dr. Cook, the researcher on this, notes that typical bullies struggle with problem solving, academics, and often come from conflict-ridden families with poor parenting and generally have negative attitudes towards others and themselves. They view school negatively, and they're negatively influenced by peers. So in many cases, bullies are psychologically strong and hold a high social status among their peers, while their victims are often emotionally distressed and socially marginalized. Peer groups can support and even encourage the bully's actions, with group memberships participating in mocking, excluding, punching, and insulting each other for entertainment. A minority of bullies who are not themselves bullied tend to enjoy school and are less likely to miss school days.
In the Journal of Aggressive Behavior, and who knew that was such a thing, but I'm definitely here for it, researcher Vaillancourt indicates that adult bullies often have authoritarian personalities and a strong desire to control or dominate others. Prejudicial views of subordinates can also be a significant risk factor. In a recent study, bullies displayed lower self-esteem related to school performance than non-involved students, but had higher social self-esteem compared to victims of traditional bullying. Brain studies have revealed that the reward center in bullies' brains activates when they see someone inflicting pain on another person.
So that is definitely leading towards this neurological model of which we have more and more information,
right,
that may very well allow us to accurately diagnose in younger people. You know, we've stayed away from diagnosing personality disorders for years because we say we want to wait till they're adults, but that's a holdover from before we started getting all this data from scans, right?
That's true. That's a really good point. I mean, guys, it's hard, you know, the nature versus nurture riddle has always been there. Now we're getting a little bit more information on the nature part and biologically what's going on, whether it be genetics or brain systems, as we talked about in our previous episode on OCD. It's the more information we know, we might be able to start making diagnoses earlier. Is that the right thing to do? I mean, for intervention and treatment? Yeah, absolutely. For stigma and, you know, labeling someone with something that might carry with them forever, that's hard for me to say, let's, you know, slap diagnoses on a lot of these kids. But maybe it's less about diagnosing and more just about the interventions and the treatment. So as far as victim selection goes, we know that bullies are strategic in their selection of their victims. Research indicates that until approximately age 7, bullies target nearly any peer. And as children age, bullies become more selective, often conducting a quote unquote shopping process to identify suitably submissive victims who react visibly to bullying and who lack social allies. Potential victims often display a lack of assertiveness and project insecurity and fear long before encountering a bully. These children are more likely to comply with the bully's demands and exhibit visible distress, which reinforces the bully's sense of dominance. Boston Magazine writer Alyssa Giacobbe highlights a significant shift in the nature of bullying among children. Prior to 2016, Elizabeth Englander notes that students primarily bullied each other for social reasons, such as conflicts over romantic interest or low social status. However, in 2016, there was a marked increase in bullying based solely on group membership, including being LGBTQ+ or having immigrant parents. She says, quote, "To my mind, it's the most serious and disturbing change we've ever seen," end quote. She points out that the rise in adults expressing biased attitudes has influenced our children to mimic such behavior. a phenomenon unprecedented in her extensive research. That's terrifying.
It is. Well, but we've known about it for several years now, and it's concurrent with a shift in culture here in America to say what you want to say and feel that you have you're allowed to say horrible things to people. But it also reflects back to an underlying belief in marginalizing communities that are people of color, people from other countries, other cultures, different sexual orientations, because again, as you described earlier, it gives a person a sense of power. Like,
sure.
I am better than you. You are bad. You are lazy. You are corrupt. You are sinful. You are all these things. And I'm not those things. So that allows me to talk down to you and to treat you this way. Now, there's also very interesting data points that have come up about the similarities of the victim profile in bullying. And victims tend to comply with demands. They tend to acquiesce quickly to the demands of those bullies, and they will give up their possessions and they'll comply with directives. Of course, if we looked at this from a trauma response model, this would be a fawn response. Like, you're going to try and de-escalate the situation by going along and showing that you're not a threat, you're not a harm. And it's an immediate response, unfortunately, and gets reinforced in unhealthy ways at times. And there's also a tendency of victims to not necessarily be able to regulate their affect, so they exhibit visible distress. And victims' visible displays of their pain and suffering, like crying or adopting defensive postures, can also serve sometimes as reinforcement for bullies. Again, going back to the point that you pointed out, that just enhances their sense of power when they see someone stressed out, angry, upset, crying. Again, I want to be very careful here. That doesn't mean I'm advocating for any closure off or damping down of emotions in anyone. Emotional response, emotional expression is very healthy, but we're just saying that these are some of the things that show up, because if a bully is going to get off on seeing someone cry or react in a fearful way, one of the ways you can defend against that is by adopting a gray rock technique of, like, I don't give a shit what you're saying. That immediately can de-escalate the situation. And then there's also the factor of a lack of deterrence. So a victim's inability to effectively shield against or deter aggression coming from the bully often results in their social ostracism, even among non-bullying peers. And of course, this is actually more in adolescent and pre-adolescent groups where there's more groupthink. So even, bystanders, neutral bystanders, there's the herd technique. They will go to the person who is exhibiting the power.
Right.
And in this defensive posture themselves of not wanting to be necessarily associated with the identified victim, because they themselves do not want to become a victim. So other academic investigations have expanded on the understanding of the psychological underpinnings of bullies. For example, a study published in the Journal of Child Psychology and Psychiatry identified high levels of, surprise, 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 Machiavellianism, which is characterized by manipulative and exploitive behaviors among those identified as bullies. And we've talked about Machiavellianism in several different episodes, particularly when it comes to the dark triad and the dark tetrad in adult diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder, and then a further understanding. I'm not going to say diagnosis because it's not a diagnosis, but when we're talking about actually psychopathy. And then additionally, research in the Journal of Youth and Adolescent highlights the significant role in environmental factors like family dynamics and the school climate and environment itself that have a unique and very significant role in the development and the perpetuation of bullying behavior.
Yeah. So bullies are really good at sizing up victims and
that's what it comes
who's
to.
my target. They have these visual clues for it. They assess their behavior. This is going to be someone that's going to react the way I want them to react and that I'll have the power over. Very, very selective. Interesting. I want to jump back into the weeds a little bit into the different types of bullying. And, we named 4 different categories, but I want to get into a little bit more. So we know that both bullying and hate crimes share the commonality of devaluing and disrespecting the victim, but the motivation behind hate crimes is specifically rooted in bias against a particular social group. Conversely, bullying can be broader, targeting individuals based on perceived vulnerability or nonconformity, often affecting members of minority groups who may be more susceptible to such aggression, kind of depending on the culture and the population where this is happening. So physical, verbal, and relational bullying are most prevalent in primary school and can begin much earlier, continuing even into later stages of life. Cyberbullying, on the other hand, typically starts in early adolescence, of course, coinciding with the increased prevalence of cellular devices. The literature classifies bullying into several distinct types. They go on to say that that includes nonverbal, verbal, and physical behavior, where nonverbal bullying indicates actions like glaring or making threatening gestures, or you're purposefully excluding someone from a group. Verbal bullying encompasses things like name calling and taunting and derogatory remarks, whereas, like we mentioned before, physical bullying could be all sorts of things that includes direct physical aggression, hitting, kicking, or even damaging property of somebody else.
So, yeah, and within those categories that you're talking about, it gets even drilled down further into categories like individual and collective bullying. So, individual, one person targets another. Collective or mobbing is a group targeting an individual. And then there's emotional and relational bullying. Emotional, like, includes actions intended to hurt someone's feeling or self-esteem. So actually figuring out, like you were saying, being able to zero in on what a person's weakness is and use that, or what a perceived weakness is and sort of fan it into a flame. And then relational bullying, interesting, is the damaging of someone's social relationships or their reputation using tools such as gossip or social exclusion. Another unfortunate category that we're more and more aware of is hate crimes. And hate crimes are an extreme form of bullying. And that is where a perpetrator targets their victim based on their perceived membership in an out group. And like I was saying before, these can include biases against race, ethnicity, skin color, religion, nationality, gender identity, sexual orientation, or even disability. And while all hate crimes include elements of bullying, not all bullying constitutes a hate crime. And that's another difficulty that comes in, like HR that has to deal with and discern between, right? Because hate crimes are specifically motivated by a prejudice against the victim's perceived group. And then, of course, the thing that has really changed the entire landscape of bullying over the past 20 years is cyberbullying, because cyberbullying can occur in the virtual world, and that includes harassment, threats, and humiliation that is conducted and expressed through digital platforms. And unfortunately, more and more, we are seeing this emerging in early adolescence because everyone has a cell phone and everyone is attached to social media because it has become ubiquitous through all levels of our life in today's world.
Yeah. My 12-year-old kids take on it, because they'll talk about this at school or we hear about it, on the TV or something. And she's like, I don't get online bullying. Like, just turn your iPad off, dude. I'm like, it's not that easy for some kids. It's definitely more, but she's just like, ugh, just turn off your device. She's so over hearing it.
I love it. I wish certainly didn't have electronics to anywhere to the extent of what it is today, but I wish I'd had a friend or a mentor or someone to be able to say, I mean, it's different when your mom says, oh, just ignore it, like, because that's not reflective. Right. But if you have a peer, someone who cares, like that you can relate to and go, oh, this is my peer and they're giving me permission to ignore it. They're telling me it's not important. That makes a big difference, I think. But, it's not a new phenomenon. Bullying has been around for centuries, and we have historical documentation on it going back to ancient civilizations. Greek and Roman societies had instances of bullying among their peers, and that was justified by societal norms because those norms valued dominance and strength. During the Middle Ages, bullying was prevalent in many forms, particularly within educational and military settings. Then schools and apprenticeships often involved older students or senior apprentices exerting control and dominance over their younger counterparts, sometimes leading to severe abuse and hazing. And a really fascinating, to me, perspective that emerged from this type of environment that is well known for significant levels of bullying has to do very much with Harry Potter and one of my favorite actors, Tilda Swinton. Tilda is known for her remarkable ability to absolutely disappear into any number of roles. I mean, she can play anything.
Yep.
The woman is amazing. And she, as a British citizen, has straightforwardly criticized the concept of British boarding schools. And she attended West Heath's girls' school in Kent. And in an interview with the Scots magazine, she strongly asserted that boarding schools are just an incredibly cruel environment for children. And she argues that such settings are absolutely detrimental to their upbringing and their mental health. And she emphasizes that the need for parental presence during their educational years is really important, and that the romanticizing of films like Harry Potter and the boarding school experience is making this a problem. Fascinating, right?
It is. I think we need to explore boarding schools a little bit more to see what's there. I mean, I know we've done sort of some related episodes, but yeah, that would be interesting to look into. It's interesting that her concerns are rooted in really a long-standing history of institutionalized bullying in English boarding schools, which clearly has been documented. Historically, these schools have been known for harsh disciplinary practices and a culture that often perpetuated bullying. Research indicates that hierarchical structures and isolated environments of boarding schools can exacerbate power imbalances, leading to frequent instances of bullying. In the early 20th century, reports of severe hazing and bullying were common, with older students often exerting control over younger ones through intimidation and violence. And as you mentioned, we all romanticize the boarding schools in popular media, particularly through the Harry Potter series. And it has a notable impact on public perception. The so-called Harry Potter effect led to a stabilization of boarding school enrollments in the late 1990s and early 2000s, which significantly reversed a trend of declining numbers in both the UK and France. I wonder what it's like here, because there's boarding schools here as well. However, the positive portrayal of boarding schools in these stories often overlooks the darker realities of institutionalized bullying and its long-term effects on students. Yeah, I think she brings up a good point, especially just talking about like the socialization of it. I mean, I learned about, that boarding schools are an option here. And I was like, who's sending their child away for high school? Which I'm not talking about like to a horribly abusive place or anything like that. But you think about values of having both your social peers, your instructors, and your parents present in your life, as well as the rest of your community or place of worship or whatever that is. It just feels so much more enriched if they're still in their, family home. I don't know. Interesting takes, I'm sure, on.
I mean, I'm sure that somebody could argue that there are societal bonds and societal connections that are made. I mean, that's how we sort of substantiate the Greek system in colleges today. But that would be interesting to look at. But again, I guess we have a more of a modern take on this, that it's more important or just as important to have really healthy relationships with your family that are close and supportive, and you're learning a different set of lessons there. It's just very interesting that really in the 19th and 20th centuries, that as bullying became more recognized within the context of schools and military, like we were saying before, that the process of industrialization and urbanization has brought more attention to the conditions of children and adolescents, where we used to just ignore them. Like, oh, they're little adults, they'll figure it out, or they're not even human. They're, I'll talk to them when they're 16, right? But now we're putting a lot more emphasis on the research about the psychological and social impacts of bullying, because before it was just dismissed often as a normal part of growing up, which is just terrible to think about, right? So there has been acknowledgement and evolution. Social awareness about the harmful effects of bullying is on the rise. I mean, it began to rise in the late 20th century, really. And landmark research in the 70s by Norwegian psychologist Dr. Dan Olweus highlighted the severe consequences of bullying. And that led to the development of the Olweus Bullying Prevention Program. And this program has become a model for anti-bullying initiatives all across the world. So now in the 21st century, many Western societies are increasingly viewing bullying as a real significant public health issue. And the rise of digital technology has introduced cyberbullying, as we said, that extends the reach and the impact of these terrible behaviors. So legislation and school policies have been implemented to address and prevent bullying in some institutions, but not across the board. And this reflects a shift from tolerance to active intervention and support for victims.
Interestingly, in Eastern cultures, including those in Asia, have also experienced bullying, though cultural context can influence its manifestation and perception. In many East Asian countries, collectivist values emphasize group harmony and social hierarchy. This can lead to bullying behaviors rooted in maintaining social order and conformity. For instance, in Japan, the concept of ijime, bullying, involves group dynamics where the victim is often ostracized and humiliated. In recent years, Eastern societies have begun to address bullying more openly. For example, South Korea has implemented strict anti bullying laws and school programs following high profile cases that highlighted the severe psychological impact of bullying on students. Similarly, China has seen increased media attention and governmental initiatives aimed at reduce bullying and supporting mental health in schools.
So, as we were saying, the 21st century has seen a paradigm shift in how bullying is viewed compared to previous historical periods. So, in the past, bullying was often perceived as a rite of passage or an inevitable aspect of childhood and adolescence. And this perception, unfortunately, contributed to a lack of intervention and support for victims, which, of course, expectedly perpetuates a cycle of abuse. Today, there's a broader understanding of the long-term psychological, emotional, and social consequences of bullying, and research has shown that victims of bullying are at higher risk for mental health issues such as depression and anxiety, as we've spoken about before, but also as well as academic problems and social isolation. So hopefully we're moving to more of a compassionate and proactive approach to prevent bullying and also offer intervention that is timely and of the correct level of intervention needed. Contemporary society also recognizes the role of bystanders and the importance of creating supportive environments that discourage bullying. Anti-bullying campaigns, emotional educational programs, legal frameworks aim to create safe and inclusive spaces for everyone, emphasizing the importance of empathy, respect, and community support. When you have individuals, even if they're children, even if they're elementary school children, middle school children, high school, young adults, when one person is able to stand up and say, that's messed up, or like, what are you talking about? Why are you doing this? That gives an image, a mentor, a role model for other peers to follow. And that in itself can absolutely minimize. It's something that really is a parental role. It's a parental responsibility to educate their children in, are you going to be a part of this, or are you going to be someone that's a support? And it's not that everybody has to jump in and bodily prevent a punch being thrown, but being supportive of your peers if they're the victims of this. I mean, that's a very valuable lesson to teach your kids.
Yeah, I think that's been even, some of the PSAs or campaigns for it here in the US is, you don't have to step in between physical violence that's happening, but check in on that person afterwards, support them in ways they want to be supported, ask if you can go with them to help report this, that sort of thing. So I think we've talked before, maybe it was in our hazing episode, but kind of we have to be careful to not overly task kids that aren't brave enough to get into the middle of some of these things with like the sole responsibility. But, it goes back to active bystandership, what we've talked about before. And, even if you're the friend of the bully, like checking that guy or gal and just saying something to them, like, that's not cool. What you're doing could be a little bit of chipping away at this behavior.
Yeah. There's also the idea that, again, we've referred to this many times over the years, is that our knowledge as clinicians has a high expiration rate, or an exhaustion or an extinction rate. We have to stay on top of the new evidence and research that comes out. And we're responsible for that. And it's frustrating that in pulling research for this, there were still so many papers and so many resources that were all crowing that Columbine was a result of bullying. And that is something that I wish we could excise from the internet.
I know.
And even one of the authors, and that is on the board of directors for the Humanity Project, a professor of sociology and criminology at Barry University, this person wrote that there was a direct correlation. And the article is old, and that website needs to take that paper down.
Yeah.
Those kids had other things going on. Those perpetrators had a number of other things going on, but they were not bullied.
Right. So
now, that's not to say that there aren't cases where bullies can act out in that way, but Columbine is not one of them.
Yeah, no, definitely. That just goes to so many myths about Columbine, that for what it was and when it was happening in time just got like etched into stone and are really, really hard to reverse. So, but I mean, I think, jumping to kind of looking at the link between bullying and crime, there is some information out there. So bullying during youth is a significant risk factor for later delinquency and criminal behavior, particularly if there is not intervention. Both bullies and their victims have higher chances of engaging in criminal activities in the future. So we're talking about real damage being done here to the victims of bullies that, could lead to other risk factors for them in which they start to have a tendency towards their own types of criminal activity. When we look at the impact of bullying on future behavior, studies show a substantial percentage of school bullies are convicted of crimes as adults, and that bullying behavior in school tends to correlate with later violent acts. So, I mean, I think we need to be, especially when we're talking about adolescents and kids, bullying can take place at school or not at school. But when we're talking about at school, you can see how this can bump up the risk a little bit more for doing that behavior at a place where you're watched, where there's authority figures in place. Like, it's a little bit more brazen, if you will.
Yeah.
And sometimes we look at those things when we're looking at risk factors for criminal behavior and recidivism, because if they're willing to do it there, then what else are they willing to do? And then for victims, they are prone to later having bouts of aggression and involvement in criminal activity. And that's really seen as a way that they're unfortunately trying to struggle with regaining power back in their lives. So that, it's very, very complicated, but at the core, we find that that's what they're trying to do with those behaviors. So again, when we're looking at other associated risks, both bullies and victims are more likely to carry weapons to school. I mean, obviously for different purposes, one for intimidation or to use, and another for protection. And there are increased likelihoods of engaging in abusive, intimate relationships. We also see higher rates of illegal substance use, and we see elevated risk of suicide among both the bullies and the victims as compared to the general population. So a lot of very, very important issues, mental health struggles, and behaviors that we're looking at here that can just come as a result of bullying, which, like we mentioned, generation ago was just a thing that you endured.
Yeah, it's fascinating, too, because building on what you were saying about the likelihood of future criminality, 55% of school bullies in a Swedish study were later convicted of crimes, and 36% had multiple convictions. Then in US, 60% of boys that were identified as bullies between the 6th and 9th grades were convicted of at least one crime by the age of 24, and 40% had 3 or more convictions. That's really substantial.
Yeah.
That's really substantial.
It really is.
So we want to give you one more criminal case, Phoebe Prince. This is a very, very significant one from 2010. 15-year-old Phoebe Prince hanged herself after enduring months of intense bullying at South Hadley High School in Massachusetts. She had moved from Ireland to South Hadley with her mother and her sister. And after dating an older boy, she began to be bullied by his ex-girlfriend and friends, both in school and online. Her suicide drew national attention and led to the prosecution of 6 students for various charges related to the bullying. But horrifically, the bullying continued even after her death, with derogatory posts appearing online, including a horrifically titled Facebook page that made fun of the tragedy that I was actually shocked when I saw the name of the Facebook group. I will not share it here, but it was quite shocking. In March 2010, 6 of those upperclassmen from South Hadley High School were indicted on federal charges that included stalking, criminal harassment, and statutory rape in connection with the bullying of Miss Prince. The charges were unprecedented, but the district attorney reached a resolution involving misdemeanor charges with probationary terms. If the teens meet the probation requirements, they get to avoid a criminal record. Despite criticisms that the charges were way too lenient, DA David Solomon emphasized the goal of ensuring that the youths become productive citizens. The Prince family approved of the plea terms. Phoebe was involved with Sean Mulvihill and Austin Renaud, both of who had girlfriends and were part of this group. So while it was initially reported that the bullying was started by her boyfriend's ex-girlfriend, her boyfriend was involved in the crime at the time.
Yeah. So the boys, their girlfriends, and other students engaged in what was called essentially a 3-month campaign of just verbal and physical harassment against Phoebe. The bullying included derogatory slurs, threats, and physical intimidation, culminating in Phoebe's suicide on January 14th, 2010. The school principal allowed the bullies to remain in class during the internal investigation, drawing criticism from the community and the press, of course, who was following this very closely. Another Facebook group called for the expulsion of the bullies, and thousands of people joined this group. Meanwhile, the Prince family sought public recognition of the wrongdoing and accountability, which the legal proceedings eventually achieved. South Hadley appointed a new principal following the resignation of the previous one amid the scandal.
So the students charged faced significant public scrutiny and humiliation, including online harassment and even death threats. Many did not complete high school at the time, and Sean Mulvihill lost a football scholarship. South Hadley Superintendent Gus Sayer believes that the students deserve a second chance, as does the town of South Hadley. In 2019, Sean Mulvihill was accused of rape by a student at Mount Holyoke College, where he worked as a bartender. He was ordered to stay away from the student, but had not been criminally charged at that time. So Phoebe's death and the ensuing case sparked widespread attention and debate, leading to significant legal and policy changes. Please remember, folks, that if you're listening from outside the U.S., that you can rarely have a federal law that blankets every single state in our country. It's really up to not only states passing individual laws, but it's also up to school districts to interpret that law and implement their own protocols. Many times they do not do any of that. Following her death, Northwestern District Attorney Elizabeth Scheibel pushed for legislative action to prevent similar tragedies. And in May 2010, Governor Deval Patrick signed the Massachusetts anti-bullying law, defining bullying and requiring schools to implement prevention and intervention strategies. And the law defined bullying as repeated actions causing harm or creating a hostile environment, including physical, verbal, electronic, or other forms. School staff must attend annual trainings and report incidents of bullying. Schools must include bullying prevention in their curriculum and submit annual reports to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And a 2014 amendment required schools to recognize that LGBTQ plus students and students of color are more likely to be targeted.
Good. You know, nothing pisses me off more than tragedy occurring and then people going online and continuing to just horrifically harass the families, like that Facebook group you were talking about. Like, I think it was in our online trolls
It's
episode.
so antisocial.
I mean,
Yeah.
there was like a horrific death of a girl or murder, and then people were just going online and saying horrible things about her that her family had to see. Like, what is happening? You know, it's just, it's so antisocial. It's awful. I mean, yeah, I'm talking about cyberbullying and kind of the
Well,
potential with digital is just
let me throw something up.
insane.
So I've got a horrible
Please don't throw up.
no. I have a really terrible adjustment in my algorithm for watching reels on Facebook. And, that's
Don't
my
we
own
all?
fault because, the one that I stay on the
Yeah.
most, the computer is going to recognize, and the algorithm is going to send me more. So one of them that just fascinates me was this horrific car accident. And the woman who killed a carload of people
hmm
was absolutely drunk and walked away without a scratch on her. And there's a lot of video of her sitting in the jail reception area, so drunk that she's just unaware of the magnitude of what's going on. And the cop is trying to be patient with her because she keeps saying, well, when am I going to get my car? I
Yeah.
have school and work tomorrow. And he keeps correcting her, and she can't pick it up. She can't pick it up. And you're going, oh my God, what's wrong with this person? But then there was another one that got sent, and it is a family. It's a father, a mother, and a sister sitting in a hospital waiting area for their daughter. And law enforcement comes up and informs them that their daughter is responsible for the death of 3 people that were in the car. Their daughter's going to be okay.
Okay.
And the parents are horrified, but there's like this responsibility that they take, like immediately. They're like, okay, you have to explain to us what happened. Like they weren't minimized. They're absolutely in shock. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But there's even, I think the sister starts to protest and say something, and mom is like,
Whoa.
no,
Yeah.
not right now. Listen to him.
Yeah.
We have to listen to this. And look, I know I'm only looking through a pinhole at that particular situation, but even in that horrible time of tragedy, there were adults going, hold on, let's get all the information. This is horrific, but there was no minimization. There was no, they were there in the moment. And I think that that really has a tie to these bullying behaviors, because I see so many parents that will say, nope, my kid didn't do it.
Yeah.
Or those kids are lying. Or if they're bullying somebody, or if they took that action, then that kid must have deserved it. A lot of displacement
Sure.
of responsibility.
Yeah. I mean, even with it harkens back to our affluenza episode.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Absolutely.
Venn diagram after Venn diagram, as always.
Yeah. Got some media presentations.
So I think another one that comes to mind that a lot of us probably read the book when we were younger and then saw the movie was Bridge to Terabithia. So this is a film that is simultaneously very heartwarming and poignant and devastating. I mean,
Yeah.
this was hard to read as an adolescent, but the marketing of the film focused on these fantastical imaginations of 2 young friends and their growing friendship. And together they create this magical kingdom called Terabithia in the woods, which is really a coping mechanism that they're doing together, where they escape from the challenges of their real lives that include being bullied by their peers. So definitely it's not folie à deux. It's just, meant to be kind of a whimsy, magical use of their imagination.
Yeah. So it's beautiful. I highly recommend it, but it is very sad ending. One that's like terrifying and has been around forever is The Lord of the Flies. Both the book and the movie, it explores the themes of bullying and coercion among school peers through descent into savagery when this group of boys is stranded on a desert island. And as the societal structure between them breaks down, the characters of Ralph and Piggy become the targets of just relentless bullying and physical aggression by the head bully, Jack, and then, of course, his sycophantic followers. And this story really illustrates how power dynamics, fear, and the lack of authority can aggravate bullying behaviors and, of course, just lead to tragic consequences.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the Stanford prison experiment, but different.
Yeah.
With young boys on an island.
Yeah.
For real.
But now
Yeah.
give the example here. You're going to talk about the one that's like my favorite.
I mean,
I
of
just love that so
course,
much.
is Stephen King's Carrie. So whether the book, which I haven't read the book, you were telling me how it was written, it sounds so cool. I definitely want to read it.
Yeah.
But also a film. So this frames bullying as a central and devastating force that shapes the protagonist's life. The novel follows Carrie White, a shy and socially awkward high school girl who is relentlessly tormented by her peers for her differences because she's raised by a very interesting mother.
Yeah.
That's why she has such differences. But the severe,
She's getting it at home and at school.
it's
Yeah.
very true, very true. The severe bullying Carrie endures, including a particularly cruel prank at her prom, triggers her latent telekinetic powers, leading to a catastrophic and tragic climax. Through Carrie's story, Stephen King powerfully illustrates the destructive impact of bullying and the potential for violent retribution when an individual is pushed beyond their limits. And before I went back and watched the movie, I was like, oh my God, John Travolta's in this. He's one of the bullies.
There's tons of people in it. He's terrible.
He's terrible.
Awful.
I know. But yeah, such a good film. And I look forward to reading the book. You said it's written like kind of through the diaries of different people, right?
Yeah. So this, I mean, if you've seen the movie, basically the entire school, the school gym is set on fire and it's like a mass event, like all these people are killed and there's just destruction throughout the town as well because it's interesting because it's framed as Stephen King, is a remarkable author and he's been through some ups and downs in his life and in his career, but he created a book that really has been talked about. There have been dissertations written about the book Carrie. Then it explored about like what it's about, the story of a disempowered woman and the power of womanhood. Basically her powers kind of emerge as menstruation occurs.
Yep.
But what's fascinating about the book is that it's the aftermath, and the majority of the book is from chapter to chapter is you'll get a point of view from her historically, and then you'll jump into the future and read a diary entry from 3 different people who have written books that survived the event.
Okay.
Susan Snell is one of the only survivors, and her book is called My Name is Susan Snell. So they keep going back and forth. So you get all these different perspectives. If the book is, I mean, the movie, of course, is great. And so much an icon of 70s movies. Totally. It's really good. It's gritty, but it's also creative. However, the book really focuses on, Carrie's she's a normal girl with a terrible, terrible mom who has delusional disorder. And it's there's a much more realistic presentation. Carrie, I think Sissy Spacek is absolutely amazing, but Sissy Spacek is attractive and willowy, from day one. And in the book, she's like, sort of, she has acne and she's a little bit overweight and, she doesn't know how to take care of herself hygienically because she's never been taught. And
Piper Laurie's so good. R.I.P. Piper Laurie. You're amazing.
I'm here to do the Lord's work.
Well,
he ain't coming. He ain't coming.
With that, Scott, you should cover up your dirty pillows and we should move on.
We should wrap it up. That's right. Guys, thanks so much. Don't forget that we have CrimeCon UK coming up, as we've spoken about many times. Please, if you're going to join us, we have a code so that you can get a discount. That always helps us out as well.
Yep.
And then we'll be in the Berkshires the next month in September.
Can't
with
wait.
All of our favorite people.
Yes.
And we'll be doing a presentation there as well. So you better book the hotel rooms. The best hotel rooms are going pretty quick.
That is true. Look for all of those links and codes in our show notes. And with that, we will see you next month on LA
Not So
Confidential. Thank you, guys.
Bye, folks.
Bye. We We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of the Crawlspace Media Network. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
Our theme music, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons Attribution license. Please check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Instagram at LA Not So Podcast, on X at LA Not So Pod, and on Facebook at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Once a month, we go live on YouTube on Saturday afternoon, so pay attention to our social media announcements to join our interactive broadcast entitled Behind the Couch, where we interview guests on a number of psych, criminal justice, and true crime topics.
And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, additional content, host interaction, and you'll be the first to know about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool swag.
Thanks for listening, and join us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.